Have you ever carried a secret so heavy that it shaped every decision you made for over a decade? My name is Elena, and I'm 26 years old. The secret I carried wasn't mine to begin with. It was forced upon me when I was barely a teenager. But the weight of protecting someone I loved meant I had to bear it alone, in silence, for years. My father, Richard Dalton, was a man who commanded respect in our small community of Riverside, Oregon. He owned a successful insurance company and was known for his charitable donations to local schools. On the surface, he was the kind of father everyone wished they had. Involved, successful, always smiling for the cameras at school events and community gatherings. But behind closed doors, Richard Dalton was someone entirely different. He was a monster who wore a mask so convincing that even those closest to him couldn't see the truth. I had one sister, Maya. She was 3 years younger than me, born when I was barely old enough to understand what it meant to have a sibling. From the moment she came into this world, with her golden blonde hair and bright hazel eyes, she became the center of attention. But for our father, attention meant something different than it did for most parents. You see, Richard didn't want 2 daughters. He wanted one perfect daughter, one he could parade around, one he could mold into his ideal creation, one he could showcase to the world as proof of his excellence as a parent. And from the very beginning, he made it clear that there could only be one golden child at a time. I was that golden child first. From ages 3 to 7, I was Daddy's little princess. I remember the elaborate birthday parties he'd throw, always with photographers present to document every moment. I remember the expensive dresses he'd buy me, how he'd insist I wear them even when I wanted to play in the dirt like other kids. I remember my grandparents, Nana Joan and Papa Edward, visiting every Sunday and showering me with attention while Maya, still just a toddler, watched from the corners of rooms. But there was a price for being the golden child, one I didn't understand until much later. When Maya turned 5, something shifted. She had grown into an adorable child, well-behaved and eager to please. More importantly, she was young enough not to remember the early years when things were different. That's when Richard made his choice. Maya would become the new golden child, and I would become expendable. The first time he came home angry and took it out on me, I was 7 years old. I had spilled juice on his important work papers. An accident, the kind any child might make. But Richard didn't see it as an accident. He saw it as a personal betrayal, a sign of disrespect from a daughter who was no longer useful to him. I remember his face turning red, the vein in his forehead pulsing. I remember his hand connecting with my cheek, the sting that spread across my face, the way my vision went blurry with tears. But more than the physical pain, I remember the fear, the sudden understanding that the father I knew had never really existed. He had been a performance, and now the show was over. Maya witnessed it. She was sitting at the kitchen table, coloring in one of her princess coloring books. When she saw what happened, her little face crumpled, and she started to cry. That made Richard even angrier. He turned toward her, and I saw the same rage in his eyes that had just been directed at me. That's when I did something that would define the next decade of my life. I didn't think about it. I just acted. I ran between them and wrapped my arms around Maya, turning my back to our father. I became a human shield, what I would later call the burrito. I held Maya so tightly that she couldn't move, couldn't see what was about to happen. Richard's belt came down across my back. Once, twice, 3 times. Each strike felt like fire burning through my thin t-shirt. Maya screamed against my chest, but I held on, whispering to her that everything would be okay, that it was just a game, that Daddy was just upset about his papers and it would be fine soon. When it was over, when Richard finally stormed out of the house, I slowly released Maya. She was sobbing, hiccuping, her nose running. But she wasn't hurt. Not physically, at least. I had made sure of that. The marks on my back took weeks to heal. Some of them never fully did. Even now, if you look closely, you can see the thin white scars that crisscross my shoulder blades like a map of that terrible day. But Maya doesn't remember. Or at least she convinced herself she didn't remember. That's how trauma works sometimes. It protects us by erasing what we can't handle. From that day forward, the pattern was set. Richard would come home from work stressed, angry, looking for someone to take it out on. And it was always me, never Maya. Maya became his perfect little princess, his golden child. She got the birthday parties, the expensive gifts, the Facebook posts proclaiming her achievements. And I got the bruises, the verbal abuse, the isolation. I learned to hide it well. Long sleeves even in summer. Makeup to cover any marks that appeared where clothes couldn't hide them. Fake smiles when grandparents visited. I became an expert at performing normalcy, just as Richard was an expert at performing the role of loving father. But everything changed the summer I turned 13. I was developing into a young woman, and Richard noticed. His attention toward me shifted in a way that made my skin crawl. The angry outbursts continued, but they were now accompanied by something worse. Inappropriate comments, lingering looks, touches that lasted too long and landed in places fathers shouldn't touch their daughters. I tried to tell my mother, Patricia, but she was so deep in denial that she couldn't or wouldn't see it. She'd been married to Richard for 18 years by then, and her entire identity was wrapped up in being Mrs. Dalton, wife of the successful businessman. Admitting what her husband was capable of would mean admitting her whole life was a lie, so I stopped trying to tell her. I learned to avoid being alone with Richard. I spent more time at friends' houses, joined every after-school club I could, took babysitting jobs that kept me out late. Anything to minimize the time I had to be in that house with him. Maya, meanwhile, flourished. She was 11 by then, popular at school, active in drama club and dance classes that Richard eagerly paid for. She genuinely loved our father because, to her, he was wonderful. He attended every performance, cheered her on at every event, and never raised his voice to her, let alone his hand. She had no idea what he was really like because I had made sure she never had to find out. My 15th birthday was on a Friday in late June. It was supposed to be a small celebration, just family and a few close friends. Maya helped me plan it, excited to organize a party for her big sister. She picked out decorations, helped bake the cake, and invited my friends from school. The party itself was nice. We had pizza, played music, and for a few hours I felt almost normal, almost happy. My friends Sarah and Jessica were there, making me laugh with their jokes. Maya was showing off her latest dance moves. Even Mom seemed relaxed, chatting with the other parents who had stayed. But then Richard announced that everyone needed to leave. It was almost 9 o'clock, he said, and he wanted to have a special father-daughter moment with me before the day ended. A private dance, just the two of us, to celebrate me turning 15. Everyone thought it was sweet. My friends awed as they gathered their things. Mom smiled and shooed everyone out the door. Maya hugged me goodnight, telling me how lucky I was to have such a caring dad. Within 15 minutes, the house was empty except for me, Richard, and the dread that settled in my stomach like a stone. What happened that night in his bedroom, after he'd made sure Maya was asleep and Mom had taken her sleeping pill and gone to bed, robbed me of my childhood forever. The physical pain was unbearable, but the psychological damage was even worse. He told me this was normal, that fathers did this with their daughters when they loved them, that I should feel special because he chose me. I knew it was wrong. Every fiber of my being knew it was wrong. But I was 15, terrified, and completely alone. Who would believe me over Richard Dalton, respected businessman and pillar of the community? I had seen how everyone looked at him, how they trusted him, how my own mother refused to see anything wrong. When it was over, I couldn't walk properly. The pain radiated through my entire body. I told everyone I had twisted my ankle dancing, which explained my limp for the next few days. But inside, I was shattered. That night, I made a decision. I would endure whatever I had to endure to protect Maya from experiencing the same thing. If being his target meant she could remain the golden child, safe and innocent, then that's what I would do. The abuse continued throughout my high school years. Richard was careful, always making sure there were no witnesses, always having an explanation ready if anyone noticed anything unusual. He controlled me through fear and manipulation, threatening that if I told anyone, they wouldn't believe me, and Maya would become his new target. So I survived. I threw myself into my studies, determined to get into a good college far away from Riverside. I took AP classes, joined the debate team, did everything I could to build a future that didn't include Richard Dalton. My grades were excellent because studying was an escape, a way to focus on something other than the nightmare my home life had become. Maya and I remained close, but there was always this wall between us that she couldn't understand. She'd try to talk to me about our father, about how great he was, how lucky we were to have him. Each time I'd feel sick to my stomach, but I'd paste on a smile and change the subject. I couldn't tell her the truth. She was only 14, 15, 16 as the years passed. She was still Daddy's golden girl, still innocent, and I would do anything to keep her that way. When I finally graduated high school at 18, I left for Portland State University, 2 hours away from Riverside. It wasn't far enough. I'd wanted to go to school on the East Coast, put the entire country between me and Richard, but it was all I could afford even with my scholarship. Plus, leaving meant leaving Maya alone with him, which terrified me. At least being 2 hours away, I could come home quickly if needed. College was my escape and my salvation. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I threw myself into my studies, majoring in marketing with a minor in graphic design. I made new friends who knew nothing about my past. I started therapy, though I couldn't bring myself to tell my therapist everything at first. The secret was so deeply buried that excavating it felt impossible. I met Nathan Chen during my junior year of college. He was a year ahead of me, studying software engineering, and we met at a mutual friend's apartment during a study group that had devolved into a casual hangout. He was kind and funny, with an easy smile that made me feel safe in a way I hadn't felt in years. Nathan was the opposite of Richard in every way. He was patient, respectful of boundaries, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. Our relationship developed slowly, which was exactly what I needed. He never pushed for more than I was comfortable with, and when I finally told him I had trauma in my past, though I didn't specify what kind, he simply held my hand and said we'd take things at whatever pace felt right for me. We dated for 3 years. During that time, I carefully kept Nathan and my family separate. I told Nathan that my family was complicated, that my father and I didn't have a good relationship, and he respected that without demanding details. I visited home occasionally to see Maya and my mother, but I always made excuses for why Nathan couldn't come with me. Maya, meanwhile, had graduated high school and started attending community college while living at home. She was 21 by the time Nathan proposed, still under Richard's spell, still believing he was the perfect father. We talked on the phone regularly, and I visited when I could, but I always timed my visits for when Richard was at work or traveling for business. The proposal happened on a crisp autumn evening in Portland's Forest Park. Nathan and I had been hiking one of our favorite trails, the trees ablaze with gold and crimson leaves. At a scenic overlook with the city spread out below us, he got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. The ring was simple but beautiful, a small diamond on a platinum band. As I looked at it, tears streaming down my face, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope that I could build a life separate from my past, that I could create my own family, one built on love and trust instead of fear and control. I said yes, and we held each other as the sun set behind the mountains. The first person I called was Maya. It was a mistake I would come to regret, but at that moment I was too happy to think clearly. I wanted to share my joy with my little sister, the person I had protected all these years. Maya's excitement burst through the phone speaker. "Oh my gosh, Lena, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you." She squealed so loudly that Nathan, standing next to me, could hear her clearly. We laughed together, and for those first few minutes, it was perfect. Then Maya said the words that made my blood run cold. "We have to call Dad right away. He's going to be so excited to walk you down the aisle." My smile froze. "Maya, I don't think—" "Come on, Lena," she interrupted, her voice taking on that pleading quality she'd perfected as a child. "I know you and Dad have had your issues, but this is huge. This is a wedding. Family is supposed to be together for weddings. He'll be heartbroken if you don't include him." "Maya, you don't understand," I started, but I couldn't finish. How could I explain? How could I shatter her entire worldview over a phone call? "Please just think about it," she begged. "For me? I know he's not perfect, but he's our dad, and he loves us. Both of us. Even if you guys have had your problems, this could be a chance to make things better." I changed the subject, asking her about school and her new job at a local boutique. But I could tell she wasn't letting it go. The seed had been planted, and knowing Maya's stubborn streak, something she definitely inherited from Richard, she would keep pushing. Over the next few weeks, as Nathan and I began planning the wedding, Maya's campaign to include Richard intensified. She'd bring it up every phone call, send me old family photos with messages like, "Remember the good times?" and "Dad misses you so much." She didn't know what she was asking. She couldn't know. Nathan and I decided on a spring wedding about 8 months away. It would be small and intimate, just close friends and family. The guest list was short, about 50 people total. Maya would be my maid of honor. Nathan's brother Marcus would be his best man, and that would be it for the wedding party. As planning progressed, Maya became increasingly involved. She took the train up from Riverside every other weekend to help with preparations. We went dress shopping together, chose flowers, tasted cakes, and picked out decorations. It was like being close again. Like we were kids before everything got complicated. Almost. But every visit, she'd bring up Richard. "Dad's really good with vendors," she'd say while we looked at catering options. "He knows so many people in Riverside. He could probably get you a discount." Or, "Dad's so excited about having you back home. He keeps asking when you're coming to visit." I deflected every time, changing the subject or pretending I hadn't heard. But Nathan noticed. One evening, after Maya had taken the train back home, he brought it up. "Lena, we need to talk about your dad." I stiffened, busying myself with washing dishes. "There's nothing to talk about. I've been patient," Nathan said gently, coming to stand beside me. "And I'll continue to be patient. But Maya keeps bringing him up, and you keep shutting down. If we're getting married, I need to understand what's going on. Is he going to be at the wedding?" I turned off the water and gripped the edge of the sink. The secret I'd carried for 11 years felt like it was choking me. "No, he can't be there. Can you tell me why?" I wanted to. God, I wanted to tell Nathan everything. But the words wouldn't come. They were locked behind years of fear and shame and survival instinct. "He hurt me," I finally managed to whisper. "When I was younger. He hurt me in ways that fathers should never hurt their daughters." Nathan didn't press for details. He simply wrapped his arms around me from behind and held me while I silently cried over the sink. "Okay," he said softly. "Then he won't be at the wedding. We'll make that clear to everyone. Maya doesn't know," I choked out. "She thinks he's perfect. She's going to hate me for excluding him." Then maybe it's time she knew the truth. He was right, but the thought of shattering Maya's perfect image of Richard filled me with a different kind of dread. She had grown up loved and protected, exactly what I'd wanted for her. Telling her the truth would destroy that innocence, that sense of security. Was I being selfish by wanting to keep my sister happy, even if it meant carrying this burden alone? 3 months before the wedding, Maya came up for what was supposed to be a fun girls' weekend. We had plans to finalize the last details, seating charts, playlist for the reception, bridesmaid dress alterations. Friday night, we decided to stay in rather than go out. We ordered Thai food, bought a bottle of rosé, and settled in to watch Disney movies, just like we used to do when we were kids. Maya had chosen Frozen, which was fitting given our complicated sister relationship. We sang along to the songs, laughed at Olaf's jokes, and for a while, everything felt normal. But then, around midnight, with the second bottle of wine nearly empty and Anna and Elsa safely reunited on screen, Maya brought it up again. "Lena, I really need to talk to you about Dad." I felt the familiar tension creep into my shoulders. "Maya, please, no." Her voice was firm, more serious than I'd heard in a long time. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said on the phone, about you and Dad having issues. And I've been remembering things. Little things from when we were kids that I always brushed off but now seem strange." My heart started pounding. "What kind of things? Do you remember my 7th birthday? The one at home, not the party at Chuck E. Cheese." I remembered. Maya had just turned 7, and Richard had thrown her a massive party at one of those indoor playground places. But the week before, we'd had a small family celebration at home. "I remember," I said carefully. "That day, I spilled my juice on Dad's laptop. Do you remember what happened?" I did remember, but I said nothing. waiting to see where she was going with this. I remember Dad getting really angry. Maya continued, her voice quiet. I remember his face turning red and him yelling. And then, it's fuzzy. But I remember you being there, between us somehow. And then later, you couldn't sit right for a while. You said you'd fallen off your bike. The burrito moment. She was starting to remember. Maya, and then there was your 15th birthday. She interrupted. Everyone left, and Dad wanted that private dance with you. You were so excited before, but after, you were different. You couldn't walk right, and you were sad. So sad. I remember asking if you were okay, and you said you just twisted your ankle, but... She trailed off, looking at me with tears in her eyes. Lena, what really happened? This was it. The moment I'd been dreading for 11 years. I could tell her the truth and shatter her world, or I could keep lying and continue to protect her innocence. But looking at my little sister, 21 years old and no longer a child, I realized that protecting her by lying was actually hurting her. She knew something was wrong. She'd always known deep down. She just needed someone to confirm it. Do you really want to know? My voice was barely a whisper. Yes, no hesitation. So I told her. Not everything. I couldn't bring myself to share all the details. But enough. I told her about the burrito, about taking Richard's anger so she wouldn't have to. I told her about my 15th birthday and what Richard had done to me that night and many nights after. I told her about the years of abuse, the fear, the shame, the reason I left for college and never looked back. With each revelation, Maya's face grew paler. Tears streamed down her cheeks. At one point, she ran to the bathroom and got sick. When she came back, she sat across from me, hugging a pillow to her chest, looking like her whole world had just collapsed. Because it had. Why didn't you tell me? She finally asked, her voice raw. You were a kid, Maya. You were his golden child. You were happy and safe and loved. I couldn't take that away from you. You were a kid too, she pointed out, anger flashing in her eyes. Though I knew it wasn't directed at me. You were younger than I am now when it started. You were just a child, Lena. And you protected me, and I had no idea. God, all those years I spent praising him, telling you how lucky we were to have such a great dad. And you just... let me. How could you listen to that without saying something? Because I needed you to stay his golden child. I explained through my own tears. As long as you were his favorite, you were safe. And that's all I ever wanted. For you to be safe and happy. Maya broke down completely then, sobbing so hard she couldn't catch her breath. I moved to sit beside her on the couch, and she collapsed against me like she used to when she was little. I'm so sorry, she kept saying between sobs. I'm so sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have seen it. I should have protected you. You were 7, Maya. Then 8, then 9. You were a kid. This was never your responsibility. We stayed up talking until almost 4 in the morning. Maya asked questions, some of which I could answer and others I couldn't. She cycled through every emotion. Shock, anger, guilt, grief. By the time we finally went to bed, exhausted from crying, something had shifted between us. The wall that had always been there, the secret that kept us from being truly close, was finally gone. The next morning, Maya didn't want to talk about the wedding or finalize any plans. She wanted to talk about Richard. I can't go back there, she said over coffee. I can't go back to that house and pretend everything's normal. Every time I look at him now, I'm going to know. You can stay with me and Nathan, I offered immediately. For as long as you need. You can transfer to Portland State, get a job up here. You don't have to go back. She nodded, fresh tears forming. I think I need to. I don't think I can be around him right now. Maybe not ever. Maya moved in with us 2 weeks later. She'd gone back to Riverside just long enough to pack her essential belongings while Richard was at work. She left a note saying she was transferring to Portland State and needed space to focus on her studies. She didn't tell him the real reason. Living with Maya was both wonderful and heartbreaking. She'd often wake up crying from nightmares about memories she'd repressed resurfacing. She'd randomly start crying during the day when something triggered a new understanding of our childhood. She went through stages of grief, denying it could have been as bad as I'd described, getting angry at Richard, getting angry at our mother for not seeing it, feeling guilty for not knowing sooner. I got her into therapy, which helped. Slowly, over the weeks and months, she started to heal, or at least she started the process of healing. Some wounds never fully close, but you can learn to live with them. The wedding was now just 2 months away. Maya and I had become closer than we'd ever been. She was still my maid of honor, and now that she knew the truth, she understood why Richard couldn't be there. But Richard didn't know that Maya knew. As far as he was concerned, his golden child had just moved away for school, and Elena was still the troubled daughter who wouldn't speak to him. He had no idea that his perfect facade was crumbling. My wedding day arrived on a perfect Saturday in late May. The venue was a restored barn in the countryside outside Portland, with rolling hills and wildflowers everywhere you looked. The weather was ideal, sunny but not too hot, with a gentle breeze that made the white curtains in the bridal suite flutter. Maya helped me get ready, her hands steady as she fastened the tiny buttons down the back of my wedding gown. The dress was simple but elegant. Ivory satin with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that pooled at my feet. Maya's bridesmaid dress was a soft sage green that complemented her hazel eyes. "You look beautiful," she said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "Like a princess." "You're not so bad yourself," I replied, managing a smile despite my nerves. The nerves weren't about marrying Nathan. I was completely certain about that. They were about everything else. Whether the day would go smoothly, whether all the planning would come together, whether anything would go wrong. "Are you scared?" Maya asked softly, sitting down on the vintage love seat in the corner of the room. "A little," I admitted. "But good scared, you know? Excited scared." She smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "I wish Mom was here." Mom hadn't come to the wedding. When I'd told her that Richard wasn't invited, she'd been horrified. She'd called me selfish, ungrateful, and cruel. No matter how many times I'd tried to explain, she refused to believe that Richard had done anything wrong. In her mind, I was the problem. I'd always been the problem. Eventually, she'd declared that if Richard wasn't welcome, then neither was she. It hurt, but I'd expected it. Patricia Dalton had spent her entire adult life in denial. Accepting the truth about her husband would mean accepting that she'd failed to protect her own children. That was something she'd never be able to do. "I know," I said, sitting down next to Maya and taking her hand. "But we have each other. That's what matters." "Do you think—" Maya hesitated, then pushed forward. "Do you think there's any chance he'll show up anyway?" The thought had crossed my mind more than once. Richard was unpredictable when his control was threatened. He wouldn't take kindly to being excluded from his daughter's wedding, especially now that his reputation was at stake. "I don't think so," I lied, trying to convince myself as much as Maya. "He knows he's not welcome. Even he wouldn't cause a scene at a wedding." Maya didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway. "Well, if he does, he'll have to get through me first." I squeezed her hand, grateful for her fierce protectiveness. We'd spent our whole lives with our roles reversed, me protecting her. It felt strange, but good to know she'd protect me too. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock. At 10 minutes to 4, I stood at the back of the barn, my arm looped through Maya's. She would be walking me down the aisle since I had no father to do the job. Nathan's parents and brother were already seated, along with our friends from college, some colleagues from my marketing job, and Nathan's coworkers from the tech company where he'd recently been promoted to senior engineer. The quartet began playing and the doors opened. Maya and I stepped into the doorway together, and I caught my first glimpse of Nathan standing at the altar. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly, his black hair neatly styled, and the biggest smile I'd ever seen on his face. Next to him stood his brother Marcus, and behind them, the officiant who would marry us. Maya and I started down the aisle. I was focused on Nathan, on the future we were about to start together, on the happiness that was finally within reach after so many years of darkness. The guests stood, turning to watch us, and I heard whispers of beautiful and so happy as we passed. We were maybe 20 feet from the altar when I saw him. Richard Dalton was sitting in the back corner of the barn, partially hidden by a decorative column. He was wearing one of his expensive suits, his silver hair perfectly styled, and he was smirking. That cold, calculating smirk that I'd seen so many times before, usually right before he did something cruel. My steps faltered. Maya felt it immediately and glanced at me with concern. "What's wrong?" she whispered. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. My vision started to tunnel, the edges going dark. All I could see was that smirk, that face that had haunted my nightmares for 11 years. Maya followed my gaze and saw him. I felt her entire body go rigid beside me. "Oh my God," she breathed. "What is he doing here?" The music was still playing. Guests were starting to notice something was wrong. Nathan had taken a step forward, his expression shifting from joy to concern. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, transported back to being 14, 15, 16, powerless and terrified. Then Richard stood up and started walking toward us. Not fast, not making a scene, just casually approaching like he had every right to be there. "My beautiful daughters," he said loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Both of you look absolutely stunning." Maya's hand tightened on my arm. I could feel her shaking, with fear or rage I couldn't tell. "You need to leave," Maya said, her voice low and dangerous in a way I'd never heard before. "You're not welcome here." "Not welcome at my own daughter's wedding?" Richard's voice was smooth, charming, designed to make us look like the unreasonable ones. "Surely we can put aside our differences for one day. This is a celebration of family, after all." "You're not my family." I found my voice, though it came out thin and shaky. "Not anymore." Richard's smile didn't waver, but something dark flashed in his eyes. "Lena, don't be dramatic. Everyone's watching. You don't want to cause a scene on your special day, do you?" Nathan was walking down the aisle toward us now, his brother close behind. The officiant looked confused, and the guests were whispering amongst themselves, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding its source. "Lena, is everything okay?" Nathan asked, reaching us and immediately positioning himself slightly in front of me. It was protective but not aggressive, just his presence saying I was safe now. "This is Richard Dalton," Maya said, her voice cold. "He wasn't invited. He needs to leave." Recognition dawned in Nathan's eyes. He'd never met Richard, but he knew who he was and what he'd done. His jaw tightened, and when he spoke, his voice was controlled but hard. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a private event, and you're not on the guest list." "I'm the father of the bride," Richard said, still maintaining that charming smile. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Nathan replied. "You need to go, now." The standoff felt like it lasted forever, though it was probably only 30 seconds. Finally, Richard's smile faded slightly. He looked at me, then at Maya, then back at me. "I just wanted to see my daughter get married," he said, and for a moment he almost sounded sincere. Almost. "Is that really too much to ask?" "Yes," Maya said firmly. "It is." Richard's expression hardened then, the mask finally slipping. "This isn't over, Lena. You can't keep running from family forever. Everyone's going to find out the truth about you sooner or later, about what a liar you've always been, how you've turned your sister against me with your stories. The only liar here is you," Maya shot back. "Lena told me everything. I know what you did to her. I know what you are." Something dangerous crossed Richard's face. For a moment, I thought he might actually do something violent right there in front of everyone. But then Marcus appeared with 2 security guards we'd hired for the event. They'd been stationed outside, but had obviously noticed the commotion. "Is there a problem here?" one of the guards asked. "This man needs to be escorted off the property," Nathan said. "He's trespassing." Richard looked at the guards, then at the growing number of guests who had stood up to see what was happening. His reputation, his perfect image was at stake. If he made a scene now, people would start asking questions. "This isn't over," he said quietly, directing the words at me. Then he turned and walked out of the barn, the security guards following to ensure he actually left the property. The entire barn was silent. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. Maya had tears streaming down her face, but she was holding on to me, keeping me upright. Nathan turned to me, his hands gentle on my shoulders. Do you want to postpone? We can do this another day if you're not up for it now. I thought about it. Richard had shown up uninvited, tried to intimidate me, threatened me at my own wedding. He'd done exactly what I'd feared he might do, tried to ruin this day for me. But looking around at the faces of our friends and family, at Nathan standing in front of me with nothing but love and concern in his eyes, at Maya beside me ready to fight anyone who tried to hurt me, I realized something. Richard only had power over me if I let him. This was my day, my life, my choice. And I chose not to let him win. No, I said, my voice growing stronger. No postponement. Let's get married. Nathan smiled, that beautiful smile that made me fall in love with him. Are you sure? I'm sure. He kissed my forehead, then offered me his arm. Together with Maya on my other side, we walked the remaining distance to the altar. The officiant, who had been watching everything with wide eyes, recovered quickly. Well, he said with a small smile, shall we begin? The ceremony itself was beautiful. I managed to focus on Nathan, on the vows we exchanged, on the promises we made to each other. When he slipped the wedding band onto my finger, my hand barely shook. And when the officiant pronounced us husband and wife and Nathan kissed me, I felt the weight of the past begin to lift, even if just a little. The reception started shortly after. The catering was perfect, the music was fun, and our friends kept the mood light despite the earlier drama. But I couldn't fully relax. I kept glancing at the entrance, half expecting Richard to reappear. Nathan noticed. He squeezed my hand under the table. He's gone, Lena. The guards confirmed it. He left the property. I know, I trailed off, not sure how to explain the lingering fear. He can't hurt you anymore, not unless you let him. I wanted to believe that. I really did. Maya's maid of honor speech was emotional. She talked about growing up with me, about having the best big sister anyone could ask for, about how I'd always been there for her even when she didn't know she needed protection. There wasn't a dry eye in the house by the time she finished, and when she hugged me afterward, she whispered, "Thank you for everything, for protecting me, for telling me the truth, for being the strongest person I know." The rest of the reception passed in a blur of dancing, laughter, and cake cutting. By the time Nathan and I said goodbye to our guests and retreated to the bridal suite at the venue, I was exhausted, physically and emotionally. You okay? Nathan asked as we finally closed the door and had our first moment alone as a married couple. I think so, I said, collapsing onto the bed, still in my wedding dress. Today didn't go exactly as planned. No, he agreed, sitting beside me and taking off his shoes. But we're married. That's what matters. He threatened me, Nathan. Said it wasn't over, that people would find out the truth about me. What do you think he meant? Nathan's jaw tightened. I don't know, but whatever he's planning, we'll deal with it together. You're not alone in this anymore, Lena. You have me, and you have Maya, and we're not going to let him hurt you again. I wanted to believe him. But I knew Richard. I knew how he operated. He was going to retaliate for being humiliated at the wedding, for losing his golden child, for losing control. The question wasn't if he'd strike back, but when and how. I just didn't know yet how far he'd be willing to go. Nathan and I left the next morning for our honeymoon. We'd planned a week at a beach resort in Cannon Beach, about 2 hours north of Portland. It was beautiful, a sprawling property right on the Pacific Ocean, with our room overlooking endless stretches of sand and the famous Haystack Rock standing sentinel in the waves. Try to relax, Nathan said as we stood on our balcony that first evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. We're safe here. Your father doesn't even know where we are. I leaned back against him, trying to convince myself he was right. Maya had promised to stay with Nathan's brother Marcus while we were gone, so she was safe too. Richard had no reason to come after either of us right now. He'd made his dramatic appearance at the wedding and failed. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe he'd finally leave us alone. For the first 2 days, I almost believed it. We spent our time walking on the beach, eating at local restaurants, and exploring the charming town with its art galleries and bookshops. Nathan rented us bikes, and we rode along the coastal trail, the ocean breeze in our hair and the sun warm on our faces. It felt normal. It felt peaceful. On the third day, we decided to spend the afternoon at the resort's beach. Nathan went back to the room to grab our sunscreen while I found a good spot and spread out our towels. I was wearing my new turquoise bikini, the one Maya had insisted I buy, even though I'd protested it was too revealing. But Nathan loved it, and for once I felt confident enough to wear it. I was digging in our beach bag for my sunglasses when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Looking radiant in that turquoise bikini, Lena. The ocean breeze suits you. You always did love the beach. My blood turned to ice. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. It couldn't be. He couldn't be here. We hadn't told anyone except Maya and Marcus where we were going, and we'd both sworn them to secrecy. With shaking hands, I picked up the phone and looked at the message again. The unknown number had a Riverside area code. My mind raced. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it was spam, and the mention of the bikini was just, no. He knew I was at the beach. He knew what I was wearing. He was here. I scanned the beach frantically, searching for that silver hair, that expensive suit, that cruel smile. There were dozens of people scattered across the sand. Families building sandcastles, couples tanning, surfers in the water. But I didn't see Richard. Nathan came jogging back with the sunscreen. Hey, found it. It was in my... Lena, what's wrong? You're white as a sheet. Wordlessly, I handed him the phone. His expression darkened as he read the message. We're leaving. Right now. Nathan. No arguments. If he's here, if he's watching you, we're not staying. He started gathering our things, his movements sharp and angry. How did he even find us? I don't know. We were so careful. We hurried back to our room, constantly looking over our shoulders. Once inside, Nathan locked the door and immediately called the resort security office. I need to report a stalking situation, he said, his voice tight. Someone's watching my wife and sent her a threatening text. While Nathan dealt with security, I called Maya. Lena, what's wrong? You sound upset. Did you tell anyone where we were going? Anyone at all? What? No, of course not. Why? He's here, Maya. Dad's here. He just sent me a text describing what I'm wearing. He's watching me. Silence on the other end. Then, oh my God. Lena, you need to call the police. And tell them what? That my estranged father texted me? They can't do anything about a text message. It's harassment. It's stalking. It's his word against mine. I have no proof he's actually here. For all the police know, someone else saw me and sent a creepy text. Resort security came to our room. Two professional-looking men who took the situation seriously, but confirmed what I already knew. Without proof that Richard was actually on the property, there wasn't much they could do except keep an eye out. They did offer to move us to a different room and increase patrols around the resort. We took them up on the new room, but it didn't make me feel any safer. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside our door made me jump. Every shadow seemed to take Richard's shape. The next morning, another text arrived. Running away again, Lena? You always were a coward, but you can't run forever. I'll be seeing you soon. That was it. Nathan booked us on the first ferry back to the mainland, and we packed up our things. The honeymoon was over after only 3 days. We drove straight back to Portland in tense silence. Nathan kept checking the rearview mirror, making sure we weren't being followed. I stared out the window, watching the landscape blur past, wondering how Richard had found us and what he was planning next. Maya was waiting at our apartment when we arrived. She threw her arms around me the moment we walked through the door. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. This is all my fault. How is this your fault? She pulled back, guilt written all over her face. I didn't tell him where you were going, I swear. But I might have told Mom, back before the wedding, when we were still talking. She asked where you were going for your honeymoon, and I thought it would be okay to tell her since she's your mother. My stomach sank. Of course, Mom would have told Richard. She told him everything. She'd always been on his side, always believed his version of events over mine. It's okay, Maya, I said, even though it wasn't okay. You didn't know. I should have known better. I should have realized she'd tell him. Nathan was already on his laptop, pulling up information about restraining orders. We need to do something official. File a police report at minimum. Get a paper trail started. For what? I asked. Showing up at my wedding, which was a public event? Sending vague text messages? It's harassment, Lena. It's not enough for a restraining order. Trust me, I've looked into it. We'd need proof of threats or actual stalking behavior, not just his presence at a wedding he wasn't invited to and a couple of creepy texts. So what do we do? Maya asked. Just wait for him to escalate? That's exactly what we had to do, as much as I hated it. We changed all our locks, installed security cameras at our apartment entrance, and made sure Maya was never alone. But we all knew these were just band-aids on a much bigger problem. Richard was escalating, and it was only a matter of time before he made his next move. That next week, I returned to my job at Cascade Marketing, a small but respected firm in downtown Portland where I'd been working for the past 3 years. I specialized in social media strategy and content creation for local businesses. It was work I enjoyed, and my boss, Jennifer, was understanding about everything that had happened. I'd just settled into my desk on Tuesday morning, checking emails and trying to focus on a campaign for a new restaurant client, when our receptionist, Keiko, called over to me. Hey, Lena, there's someone here to see you. Says he's your father. Everything stopped. My heart, my breath, my ability to think clearly. I looked up slowly, and there he was, standing in our small lobby, looking every inch the successful businessman. 3-piece navy suit, leather briefcase, that warm smile he used on strangers. Surprise, Richard said, his voice carrying across the open office space. Thought I'd take my daughter to lunch. Catch up properly after the wedding chaos. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, but I was frozen in my chair. Around me, my coworkers were watching with interest. To them, this looked like a nice father surprising his daughter at work. They had no idea. I'm busy, I managed to say, my voice barely audible. Nonsense. He walked toward my desk, his smile never faltering. Everyone needs to eat. I've missed you, sweetheart. We have so much to talk about. Keiko was looking between us, clearly confused by my reaction. My coworker David, whose desk was next to mine, leaned over. You okay, Lena? You look pale. I'm fine, I lied. Then to Richard, outside, now. I stood on shaky legs and walked toward the door, very aware that he was following closely behind me. Every instinct told me not to be alone with him, but I also couldn't let him cause a scene in my workplace. My professional reputation was one of the few things Richard hadn't managed to destroy yet. We stepped out onto the sidewalk. The street was busy with Portland's usual Tuesday lunch crowd, which gave me some comfort. He wouldn't do anything in public. He was too concerned with appearances for that. What do you want? I demanded, crossing my arms over my chest in a futile attempt to feel less exposed. Is that any way to greet your father? His smile finally faded, replaced by something colder. I just wanted to have a conversation, Lena. Clear the air between us. There's nothing to clear. Leave me alone. I'm afraid I can't do that. He adjusted his tie, a gesture I recognized as him preparing for confrontation. You've been telling lies about me, poisoning your sister against me. I can't let that continue. I told Maya the truth. There's a difference. Your truth, maybe. He stepped closer, and I fought the urge to back away. But we both know what really happened, don't we? How you used to seek out my attention. How you'd do anything to be Daddy's little girl again after I made Maya the favorite. Bile rose in my throat. That's not what happened. You know that's not what happened. Do I? His smile returned, but it was cruel now. Because I have documentation that says otherwise, Lena. Journals, very detailed journals, going back to when you were 12. They tell quite a different story than the one you've been spreading. My blood ran cold. You're lying. Am I? He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then turned it toward me. On the screen was a photo of a handwritten journal page. The writing was definitely Richard's. I'd seen it enough times on birthday cards and permission slips. The entry was dated to when I was 13 and described in sickening detail how I'd supposedly come to his room at night, begging for attention, initiating inappropriate contact. It was all lies. Disgusting, twisted lies. But it looked real. The handwriting, the dates, The level of detail, it would be convincing to someone who didn't know better. You're insane, I whispered. I'm prepared, he corrected. I started keeping these records the moment you hit puberty and started acting out, trying to get my attention in inappropriate ways. I knew someday you might try to twist the narrative, so I documented everything. No one will believe that, won't they? He tilted his head, studying me. Think about it, Lena. A troubled teenage girl, jealous of her younger sister, desperate for her father's love. It's a sadly common story, and I have years of documentation to back it up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to call the police right there. But he was right about one thing. It would be his word against mine. Journals could be fabricated, backdated, but they could also cast doubt on my story, make people question whether I was telling the truth. What do you want? I asked again, my voice hollow. I want things to go back to normal. I want my daughters to respect their father. I want you to stop filling Maya's head with lies. He reached out as if to touch my face, and I jerked backward. And if you can't do that, well, I'd hate for these journals to become public. Your husband might find them very enlightening. Your employer, too. People might start to see you differently. Are you blackmailing me? I'm trying to protect my family, he said smoothly. If that means defending myself against false accusations, then so be it. All I'm asking for is a chance to have dinner, to talk things through like adults. Is that really so unreasonable? Every part of me wanted to refuse. But I also knew that if I did, he'd escalate. He'd make good on his threat to release those fake journals, and while Nathan and Maya would never believe them, other people might. My reputation, my career, my life. He could destroy all of it with a convincing enough lie. I need to think about it, I said. I'm free Friday night. 7 o'clock, my place in Riverside. Come alone and we can work this out like family should. He didn't wait for an answer. He simply turned and walked away, leaving me shaking on the sidewalk outside my office. I called Nathan immediately. He's blackmailing me, I said as soon as he answered. He's created fake journals that make it look like I was the one initiating everything. He's threatening to make them public if I don't meet with him. Lena, no, you can't meet with him. It's too dangerous. But if I don't, he'll release those journals. Nathan, they look real. He's been planning this for years. If he shows them to people, they might believe him over me. Then we'll prove they're fake. How? They're handwritten, dated, detailed. He's thought of everything. There was a pause on the other end. Then, we'll figure something out. Come home. We'll talk about this together, the three of us. That evening, Nathan, Maya, and I sat around our living room, pizza going cold on the coffee table as we tried to figure out what to do. There has to be a way to prove those journals are fake, Maya insisted. Paper analysis, handwriting experts, something. Even if we could prove they were recently written, that doesn't prove what's in them is false, I pointed out. He could claim he was transcribing old notes into new journals for safekeeping. Nathan had been quiet, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. Finally, he spoke. What if we get him to confess? Confess to what? To what he actually did. If we can get him on record admitting to the abuse, then his journals become meaningless. It proves he's lying. And how exactly do we get him to confess? Maya asked. He's not going to just admit to everything. Actually, I said slowly, an idea forming. He might. If he thinks he's in control. If he thinks he's won. I explained my thought process. Richard's biggest weakness was his ego. He loved feeling powerful, superior, in control. If I went to that dinner and played into that, acted scared, acted defeated, he might gloat. He might admit to what he'd done, just to rub it in my face. Absolutely not, Nathan said immediately. You're not going there alone. I won't actually be alone. That's the point. I pulled out my phone. I'll record everything. We can get it on tape, his confession. Then we'll have proof. It's too risky, Maya said, but I could see her mind working, considering it. We set it up carefully, I continued. You two wait nearby, listen to the audio feed. If anything goes wrong, you come in. But I need him to think I'm alone and vulnerable. That's the only way he'll slip up. We argued for hours. Nathan didn't want me anywhere near Richard. Maya was torn between wanting to protect me and recognizing that this might be our only chance to get real evidence. But eventually, reluctantly, they agreed. We spent the next 2 days preparing. Nathan bought 2 recording devices, one app on my phone and a separate voice recorder I could hide on my person. We practiced different scenarios, planned out questions I could ask to get Richard talking, established code words I could use if I felt unsafe. Maya did some research on recording laws and discovered that Oregon was a one-party consent state, meaning I only needed my own permission to record a conversation I was part of. That recording would be legally admissible as evidence. On Thursday evening, Maya came to me with something else. A large cardboard box filled with old VHS tapes and DVDs. I went back to Riverside while Dad was at work, she explained. I got these from the storage unit where he keeps old family stuff. He used to record everything, remember? All those home videos of his perfect golden child. I remembered. Richard had been obsessive about documenting his family life, always with the camera running during birthdays, holidays, school events. I haven't watched most of them, Maya continued. They were just sentimental stuff to me before I knew the truth. But what if there's something on them? Something that shows how he really was? We spent that entire evening and most of the next day going through the tapes. Most were exactly what you'd expect. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, school plays. Richard playing the role of loving father for the camera. Then Maya found one labeled simply, Lena, 14. This would have been right before. She trailed off, looking at me uncertainly. Play it, I said, my heart already pounding. The video showed me sitting on our old living room couch, looking uncomfortable in a way that was now obvious, but that I'd learned to hide back then. I was wearing jeans and an oversized hoodie, my hair pulled back in a ponytail. Richard's voice came from behind the camera. Tell everyone about your day, Lena. On screen, my younger self shifted uncomfortably. It was fine, just regular school stuff. Nothing exciting happened to Daddy's special girl. I watched myself flinch at those words, my shoulders hunching inward. No, just homework and stuff. Come on, Lena. There was an edge to Richard's voice now. You know what happens when you're not cooperative with Daddy. Present-day me felt Nathan's hand find mine, squeezing gently. On screen, 14-year-old me said quickly, I got an A on my history test. That's better. And who helped you study for that test? You did. That's right. Daddy always helps his special girl, doesn't he? The camera zoomed in closer to my face. And what do you do for Daddy in return? Tears were visible in my younger self's eyes. I'm good. Good how? Say it properly, Lena. My voice was barely a whisper. I'm good for you. Only for you. The video cut off. The 3 of us sat in stunned silence. Maya had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Nathan looked like he might put his fist through a wall. That's grooming, Maya finally said. Clear as day. He was grooming you on camera. Do we have more like this? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the churning in my stomach. We found 2 more videos showing similar interactions. Richard's possessive language, his implied threats, my obvious fear and discomfort. It was all there, documented by his own hand. This is evidence, Nathan said. Real evidence. We need to show this to the police. It's helpful, I agreed, but it's still not explicit enough. It shows inappropriate behavior, yes, but a good lawyer could argue it's just awkward father-daughter conversations. We need more. We need him to actually say what he did. Which brought us back to the plan for Friday night's dinner. Friday arrived too quickly. I spent the morning at work trying to act normal, but I couldn't focus. Jennifer noticed and told me to take the afternoon off, which I gratefully accepted. At home, I prepared methodically. I chose my outfit carefully. Conservative dark jeans and a plain gray sweater, nothing that could be construed as provocative. My hair was pulled back in the same simple ponytail I'd worn in those videos. I wanted to look small, non-threatening, defeated. Nathan helped me set up the recording devices. The phone was easy. We set it to record and I slipped it into my purse. The voice recorder was trickier. We finally taped it inside my bra, pressed against my ribs. It was uncomfortable but virtually undetectable. You don't have to do this, Nathan said for the 100th time as we tested the audio feed. We can figure out another way. There is no other way, you know that. Maya came over at 5. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy. I should be the one going, she said. This is my fault for inviting him to the wedding, for telling Mom about the honeymoon. It's not your fault, I said firmly, taking her hands. And you can't go. He wouldn't confess to you. You're still his golden child as far as he's concerned. But me? I'm the enemy now. He'll want to gloat. At 6:30, we did a final check of all the equipment. The phone was recording and streaming audio to Nathan's laptop. The voice recorder had fresh batteries and enough memory for hours of recording. I had my car keys, my phone, and the address in Riverside. Remember the code word, Nathan reminded me. If you say childhood memories, we're coming in immediately. I remember. And if anything feels wrong, if you feel unsafe for even a second, you use it. Don't try to be brave. Don't worry about getting the confession. Just get out of there. I nodded, though we both knew I was planning to see this through no matter what. The drive to Riverside took 45 minutes. Nathan and Maya followed in Nathan's car, staying far enough back that Richard wouldn't notice if he was watching, but close enough to reach me quickly if needed. They'd park on the next block and monitor the audio feed from there. I pulled up to Richard's house at 6:55. It looked exactly as I remembered from my childhood. Perfectly manicured lawn, spotless white exterior, flower beds arranged with geometric precision. Everything perfect on the outside. I sat in my car for a long moment, gathering my courage. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. We're in position. We're listening. You've got this. Taking a deep breath, I got out of the car and walked up the front path. Before I could knock, the door opened. Richard stood there, smiling that familiar smile. Lena, right on time. I always did appreciate your punctuality. Let's get this over with, I said, forcing myself to meet his eyes. Richard's smile widened slightly. Still so direct. Come in, dinner's almost ready. The house felt smaller than I remembered, but that might have been because I'd grown up since the last time I was here. The layout was the same, though the furniture and color scheme had changed. Still, I knew every escape route, every place to hide, just as I had as a child. I made pot roast, Richard said, leading me to the dining room. You always loved my pot roast. The table was set for 2 with fancy china and wine glasses. It looked less like a father-daughter dinner and more like a date, which made my skin crawl. I'm not hungry, I said, staying near the doorway. Sit anyway. We have things to discuss. I reluctantly sat, positioning my chair so I had a clear path to the door. Richard disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 plates of food. Wine? He offered, holding up a bottle. I'm driving. 1 glass won't hurt. He poured anyway, pushing the glass toward me. I left it untouched. You wanted to talk. So talk. Richard sat across from me, taking a sip of his wine. I want us to reconcile, Lena. Put the past behind us. Start fresh. By threatening me with fabricated journals? Those journals are very real, he said calmly. I started writing them when you were 13, right around the time you started showing interest. There it was. The beginning of his twisted version of events. I needed to stay calm. Keep him talking. That's not what happened. No? He cut into his pot roast with precise movements. Then what did happen, from your perspective? This was my opening. You know exactly what happened. You abused me. Physically at first, when I was little. Then when I got older, it became... I couldn't finish the sentence. Such a vivid imagination. Richard sighed. You always were creative, even as a child. Remember those stories you used to write? Always about princesses being rescued from towers. This isn't a story, isn't it? He leaned forward. Because my journals tell a very different story. They describe a girl who was jealous of her younger sister, who would do anything for her father's attention. A girl who initiated inappropriate contact, and then later, when she felt rejected, created this elaborate fantasy to get revenge. The lies were so blatant, so disgusting, that for a moment I couldn't speak. I had to remind myself that I was wearing 2 recording devices, that Nathan and Maya were listening. that I needed to get him to tell the truth. "The burrito," I said. "Do you remember the burrito?" He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "What?" "When I wrapped myself around Maya to protect her from you. When you beat me so badly that I still have scars." "That never happened. I have the scars on my back. I can show them to anyone." Richard waved dismissively. "Childhood accidents. You were always clumsy, always hurting yourself. And my 15th birthday?" I pressed. "When you sent everyone away and took me to your bedroom?" His expression shifted slightly, something dark flickering behind his eyes. "We danced. That's all. A special father-daughter dance for your birthday. That's not all that happened. Be very careful about what you're accusing me of, Lena." His voice hardened. "False accusations have serious consequences." "They're not false." "Then prove it." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us. I wasn't recording on it. The real recording was happening through the hidden device. But he didn't know that. "I have the videos," I said. "The ones you made when I was 14, where you're calling me your special girl, asking what I do for you in return, grooming me on camera." For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. "Those were private family moments. They don't prove anything inappropriate. Maybe not on their own," I agreed. "But combined with my testimony, Maya's testimony, my medical records, the scars, it's enough to raise serious questions. Questions that your fake journals won't be able to answer." Richard was silent for a long moment, studying me. Then his expression changed, becoming calculating. "What do you want, Lena? Money?" "I want you to admit what you did." "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'm going to the police with everything I have. The videos, the scars, witnesses who saw how you treated us. Maybe it won't be enough to convict you in court, but it will be enough to destroy your reputation. Your business, your standing in the community, your perfect image. All of it gone." He took a long drink of his wine, considering. "And if I admit it? What then? You'll forgive me? We'll be one big happy family?" "No, but I might consider keeping it private. Between us." Another long silence. Then, "Fine. You want me to say I was too hard on you when you were younger?" "I'll say it. Yes, I disciplined you harshly. Yes, I was harder on you than I was on Maya. Parenting was different back then. It was more than discipline. What do you want me to say?" His voice rose slightly. "That I hit you? Fine, I hit you. But you were difficult, stubborn. You needed a firm hand." "And my 15th birthday?" His jaw clenched. "What about it? Tell me what happened after everyone left. What you did in your bedroom." "We danced. That's not all." He stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he smiled. "You know, Lena, I've always admired your persistence. Even as a child, when you wanted something, you wouldn't give up." He leaned forward. "Is that what this is about? You want me to say I had sex with you that night? That I forced myself on you?" I didn't respond, just waited. "Fine," he said, his voice dropping lower. "Yes, I had sex with you that night, and other nights after. But you wanted it, Lena. You begged for it. You were desperate for my approval, for my attention. You made it very clear what you were willing to do to be Daddy's favorite again." My stomach lurched, but I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my expression neutral. "I was 15, a child. You were mature for your age. You knew what you were doing." He reached across the table, and I jerked my hand away. "Did you ever say no? Really say no and mean it?" "Yes, multiple times." "I don't remember that." "That's convenient." He shrugged. "What I remember is a teenage girl who was jealous of her sister and found a way to get her father's special attention. It wasn't ideal, I'll admit. But it was consensual. It was rape. You raped me, multiple times." For the first time, real anger flashed across his face. "Don't use that word. What we had was complicated, but it wasn't rape. I was 15. You initiated it." "That's a lie." I couldn't hold back anymore. "You came to my room. You made it clear what would happen if I didn't comply. You threatened that if I resisted, you'd move on to Maya. You gave me no choice." Richard's face had gone red. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Give me your phone. What? Your phone. You're recording this, aren't you? Give it to me, now. I'm not recording anything. Liar. He lunged across the table, grabbing for my phone. I snatched it back, knocking over my wine glass in the process. Red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood. Give me the phone, Lena, he shouted. Delete whatever you just recorded. No. He came around the table fast, grabbing my wrist hard enough to bruise. I twisted away, but he caught my sweater and yanked me back. You think you're so clever, he snarled, his face inches from mine. But you're not. You never were. You were always just a stupid little girl who thought she was special. Let go of me. Not until you delete that recording. His hand went to my throat, fingers digging into my windpipe. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. This was it. This was the moment Nathan and Maya would hear through the audio feed. I just had to hold on long enough for them to get here. Help! I gasped out, hoping the voice recorder was picking it up. Someone help. Richard's grip tightened. Who's going to help you? No one's here. No one's coming. With my free hand, I groped behind me on the table, fingers closing around something hard. A wine bottle. Using every ounce of strength I had left, I swung it forward. The bottle connected with the side of Richard's head with a sickening crack. He staggered backward, releasing my throat. Blood trickled down his temple, soaking into his silver hair. You hit me, he said, sounding almost surprised. You actually hit me. I stumbled toward the door, gasping for air. Stay away from me. After everything I've done for you? He lunged again, but this time the front door burst open. Nathan came through first, with Maya right behind him. Nathan moved faster than I'd ever seen him, putting himself between me and Richard. Get away from my wife, Nathan shouted. Richard froze, looking from Nathan to Maya, then back to me. His perfect mask had completely crumbled. There was blood on his face, rage in his eyes, and for the first time he looked powerless. You brought them, he said to me, after I specifically told you to come alone. Did you really think I'd trust you? My voice was hoarse from his choking. After everything you've done? Maya stepped forward, her phone in her hand. We heard everything, Dad. Everything. The grooming, the rape, the threats. It's all recorded. You can't use that, Richard said, but there was desperation in his voice now. I didn't consent to being recorded. Oregon is a one-party consent state, I said, pulling out the voice recorder from my bra. I only needed my own consent, and I was very much consenting to record this conversation. Richard's face went pale. You set me up. I documented the truth. There's a difference. For a moment, he looked like he might attack again, but then he saw Nathan's stance, protective, ready to intervene, and seemed to think better of it. He sank back into his chair, suddenly looking smaller, older. So what now? He asked, his voice hollow. Police? Prison? You're going to destroy my life? That depends on you, I said, touching my throat gingerly. It hurt to swallow. Stay away from us. Completely away. No contact, no messages, nothing. Move away if you have to. If you do that, maybe these recordings stay between us. And if I don't, then everyone hears them. Your business partners, your friends, the police, everyone. Your journals won't mean anything compared to a recording of you confessing to raping your teenage daughter. Richard looked at each of us in turn. Maya was crying silently, her hand over her mouth. Nathan stood rigid with barely controlled fury, and I imagine I looked like a survivor. Bruised, shaken, but standing. You win, Richard said finally. For now. No, I corrected. I won the moment I walked out of this house for college 8 years ago. You just didn't know it yet. We left him sitting there, surrounded by the ruins of his carefully constructed lies. None of us spoke until we were safely back at Nathan's car. Maya drove my car, following us back to Portland. Once we were on the highway, miles from Riverside, Nathan finally spoke. Are you okay? He hurt you. We need to take you to a hospital. I touched my throat again. It was tender and would probably bruise, but I could breathe fine. I'm okay, just shaken. We need to file a police report. He assaulted you, Lena. We have it on recording. I know, I said quietly. But let's just get home first. I need to process everything. When we got back to the apartment, Maya immediately burst into tears. She threw her arms around me, apologizing over and over. I'm so sorry. I should have done something. I should have called the police the moment we heard him grab you. You did exactly what you were supposed to do, I said, holding her. You waited until we had the confession. Then you came. If you'd come too early, we wouldn't have gotten everything on recording. Nathan was already downloading the audio files from both devices. We have 2 clean recordings of the entire conversation, he confirmed. Every threat, every confession, every admission. It's all here. We spent that weekend consulting with a lawyer who specialized in domestic abuse cases. She listened to the recordings, looked at the old videos of Richard grooming me, examined the scars on my back, and read the text messages he'd sent. You have a strong case, she said. Between the physical evidence, the video evidence, and especially his recorded confession, I believe charges could be filed. The statute of limitations hasn't run out on the sexual abuse. Oregon recently extended the time limit for these cases. What are the chances of conviction? I asked. Hard to say. He'll get a good lawyer who'll try to discredit everything. But the recordings are damning, especially the part where he admits to the rape and then physically assaults you when you try to leave. That's not something you can easily explain away. Nathan and I discussed it extensively. Part of me wanted to press charges, wanted to see Richard prosecuted for what he'd done. But another part of me just wanted it to be over. I'd been carrying this trauma for 12 years. Did I really want to drag it out through months or years of court proceedings? The decision was made for me a week later when we received a certified letter from Richard's attorney. In it, Richard agreed to sell his house in Riverside and move out of state. He would have no contact with me, Maya, or Nathan ever again. In exchange, we would not press charges or release the recordings publicly. He's running, Maya said when I showed her the letter. He knows he'd lose in court, so he's running. Good, I said. Let him run. As long as he's out of our lives, that's what matters. We accepted the terms. Richard sold his house within a month and moved to Arizona. We kept our copies of the recordings locked away as insurance. If he ever broke the agreement and contacted us again, we'd go straight to the police. Mom never spoke to me again. When she found out we'd gotten Richard on tape confessing, she called me one last time to scream that I'd destroyed her marriage and her life. I tried to explain that Richard had destroyed his own life through his actions, but she wouldn't listen. She moved to Arizona with Richard, still in denial about what kind of man she'd been married to. It hurt, losing my mother. But I also realized that I'd lost her years ago, the moment she chose to look away from what was happening in our home. This was just the final acknowledgement of something that had been true for a long time. The months following Richard's move were a strange mixture of relief and grief. Relief that he was gone, that the threat was over, that I could finally breathe. But also grief for the childhood I'd lost, for the mother who chose her husband over her daughters, for the years of trauma that would take time to heal. Maya struggled too. She transferred officially to Portland State and got a job at a local bookstore. She was in therapy twice a week, working through her own trauma. The guilt of not knowing, the anger at Richard, the loss of the father she thought she'd had. One evening, about 3 months after Richard's move, Maya came over for dinner. We were all sitting around our table. Me, Nathan, Maya, and Marcus, who'd started dating Maya. When Maya said something that surprised me, I need to thank you, Lena. For what? For protecting me all those years. For taking the abuse so I didn't have to. For loving me enough to carry that secret alone. Tears welled in her eyes. I know I've said it before, but I don't think I really understood until recently just how much you sacrificed for me. You were my little sister. Of course I protected you. You were a child yourself. You shouldn't have had to. She reached across the table and took my hand. But you did, and I want you to know that I see it now. I see how strong you are, how brave. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be even half the person you are. I squeezed her hand, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Also, Maya continued, a small smile breaking through her tears, I want you to know that you're going to be an aunt. Nathan and I both gasped. What? Maya's smile widened as she looked at Marcus, who grinned back. I'm pregnant. Just 8 weeks. We weren't planning to announce yet, but... She shrugged. After everything we've been through, I realized life's too short to wait for the perfect moment. I jumped up and hugged her, both of us crying and laughing at the same time. Nathan congratulated Marcus, and for the first time in months, the mood in our apartment was purely joyful. You're going to be an amazing mother, I told Maya, because you're going to be everything Richard wasn't. You're going to be present, loving, protective. I learned from the best, Maya said, looking at me with such love and gratitude that I almost started crying again. 6 months after Richard moved away, I had my first full night's sleep in years. No nightmares, no waking up in a cold sweat, just peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. When I woke up that morning, Nathan beside me and sunlight streaming through our bedroom window, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't healed. Healing from trauma is a long process, not a destination. But I was healing, actively healing. And for the first time since I was 13 years old, I felt like I had control over my own life. I'd started my own marketing consulting business, working from home and choosing my own clients. It was scary leaving the security of my job, but Nathan supported me fully. You've been brave your whole life, he'd said when I told him my plans. This is just a different kind of brave. Maya gave birth to a beautiful baby girl in early autumn. She named her Eleanor, after me. Eleanor was my full name, though I'd always gone by Lena. When Maya handed me my niece for the first time, this tiny, perfect human who would never know the grandfather who'd caused so much pain, I felt hope. She's going to grow up knowing she's loved, Maya said, watching me hold Eleanor. Really, truly loved. No conditions, no golden child, no scapegoat. Just love. She's going to grow up knowing her mother is a fighter, I said, gently rocking Eleanor. That's the best gift you can give her. A year after Richard's confession, Nathan and I went back to Cannon Beach to reclaim the honeymoon that had been cut short. We stayed at the same resort, walked the same beaches, but this time there were no threatening texts, no looking over our shoulders, no fear. On our last evening there, we sat on our balcony watching the sunset, just as we had a year ago. Are you happy? Nathan asked, pulling me close. I thought about it. Happiness, after trauma, isn't the absence of pain. It's not pretending the past didn't happen or that everything's perfect now. It's finding joy despite the scars, building a life that's worth living despite, or maybe because of, everything you've survived. Yes, I said honestly, I am. Good. He kissed the top of my head. You deserve to be happy, Lena. You've always deserved that. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Tomorrow we'd go home to our life in Portland, to Maya and Eleanor, to our friends and work and normal everyday existence. But tonight, in this moment, I let myself feel completely at peace. Richard was gone. The recordings were locked away but available if needed. Maya was building a beautiful life for herself and her daughter. And I had Nathan, who had stood by me through everything, who had never once made me feel weak or damaged or less than whole. I'd spent 12 years of my life defined by trauma, by secrets, by fear. But I was done letting Richard Dalton define who I was. I was a survivor, yes. But I was also a wife, a sister, an aunt, a businesswoman, a friend. I was Elena Martinez Chen, 27 years old, and I was finally truly free. 3 years later, I stood in the backyard of our new house, watching Maya chase 3-year-old Eleanor through the sprinkler. Nathan was grilling burgers while Marcus set the picnic table. It was an ordinary summer Saturday, the kind of day I used to dream about when I was a teenager trapped in Richard's house. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Richard Dalton, formerly of Riverside, Oregon, arrested in Phoenix, Arizona on charges of child exploitation. My blood ran cold. I opened the article and read quickly. Richard had been caught with inappropriate images on his computer. The investigation was ongoing, but charges had been filed. Lena? Nathan had noticed my expression. What's wrong? I showed him the article. His jaw tightened. Do you need to do anything? No, I said slowly. He's finally facing consequences. Not from us, but from the law. That's actually better. Maya came over, Eleanor on her hip. What's going on? I told her about the arrest. For a moment, she looked sick. Then she looked at Eleanor and her expression hardened. Good. Let him rot in prison. It wasn't the ending I'd expected. I'd thought the story ended when Richard left Oregon, when we'd secured our safety through recordings and legal agreements. But maybe this was the real ending. Richard finally facing legal consequences, not for what he'd done to me, but for his continued pattern of abuse toward children. The district attorney from Arizona contacted us a week later. They'd found other victims, other families Richard had destroyed. They wanted to know if I'd be willing to testify about my own experiences to help establish a pattern of behavior. I thought about it for a long time. I talked to Nathan, to Maya, to my therapist, and then I said yes, not because I needed closure. I'd already found that in building my new life, but because there were other survivors who deserved justice, who deserved to see Richard held accountable. If my story could help put him away and protect future victims, then telling it one more time would be worth it. The trial took place the following spring. I testified for 2 days, telling the court about the grooming, the abuse, the rape. I played the recording of Richard's confession. Other victims testified too. Young women who'd worked at his company, neighbors' daughters he'd manipulated. Richard was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 30 years in prison. He'd be 78 when he got out, if he lived that long. When the verdict was read, I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I just felt tired and grateful that it was finally over. Richard would spend the rest of his life in prison, where he couldn't hurt anyone else. Maya and I walked out of that courthouse together, the spring sun warm on our faces. Eleanor was with Marcus's parents for the week, and Nathan was waiting for us at the hotel. How do you feel? Maya asked as we reached the car. Ready to go home, I said. Ready to move on with our lives and not have Richard Dalton be part of our story anymore. He's not, Maya said firmly. He's just a footnote now. Our story is about us, about surviving, about healing, about building something better. She was right. Richard Dalton had taken 12 years of my life. He didn't get to take any more. We drove back to Portland that afternoon, back to our chosen family, back to our real lives. And for the first time since I was 13 years old, I felt like I could truly breathe. The nightmare was over. The monster was locked away, and I was free.